The screams of war echoed through the dead silence of space, muffled only by the void's eternal indifference. Above the shattered moons of Chirox 9, 17 capital ships twisted and burned, some split in half by graviton torpedoes, others venting molten debris from their ruptured plasma cores. The sky, once a pristine canvas of cerulean stars, was now a hellscape lit by shockwave bursts and scorched metal hulls. Among the drifting wreckage, a lone Terran dropship, charred black, its starboard engines sheared clean off, floated like a ghost untouched by the armada it had just annihilated. Inside that ship, amidst the dying hum of flickering emergency lights, a man sat motionless in the pilot's cradle, staring at the wreckage with eyes that no longer blinked. His name. Rael Vorta, no rank, no allegiance, no known planetary registry. He didn't exist on any galactic database, yet his name traveled faster than light, passed in whispers across outposts, encrypted into the caution protocols of mercenary guilds, and etched into the death prayers of the Dominion's priests. The feared, the unkillable, the spectre of Sol. The galaxy had faced exterminator fleets, wormhole beasts, and sentient AI plagues. But no single entity, no human, had ever carved such terror into the bones of empires. And the most chilling part? Rael never spoke to the press, never claimed victory, never recorded a single message, except one. A broadcast that blinked to life moments after the slaughter at Chirox 9. It was short, it was simple. You built this war, I will end it. But who was he? To understand Rael Vorta, you have to dig back through broken histories, redacted records, and corrupted star logs from the Sol archives. He was born in the Mars Shadow districts during the era of Black Ice, a time when food riots were weekly, corporate warfare was sanctioned, and oxygen credits meant survival. His mother worked the mines beneath Eos Crater, his father, unknown. By the time Rael was 6, he was a street shadow, smuggling old tech to rogue AI cults just to afford heat. At 13, he was drafted by the Terran Front after surviving a mercenary raid, apparently fighting off 2 adult insurgents with only a fractured rebar rod. He wasn't conscripted, he was claimed. And then came the war, the Galactic fracture. Wars erupted when the fragile Virel Prime Accord collapsed. The Zentari Dominion, genetically evolved war-bred conquerors from the outer spirals, saw humanity's disunity as an invitation. Earth's defenses crumbled in weeks. Mars lost half its colonies in a single lunar cycle. In desperation, the Terran Council reactivated Project Revenant, a program buried for being too successful, too dangerous. Project Revenant wasn't a cyber soldier initiative. It was a metamorphosis protocol. The goal: to create something that would not obey, would not question, and could not die. Each candidate was stripped of organic limitations, nerves replaced by biophotonic fibers, bones overlaid with adaptive carbon alloy, and minds threaded with semi-sentient code known as Ego 9. It was more than AI. It learned, evolved, predicted. It could anticipate enemy movements before the battle began. They tested it on 50 subjects. 49 died screaming. Rael Vorta walked out of the chamber, silent, alive, changed. But what terrified the scientists wasn't that he survived. It was that his neural readouts showed zero deviation from baseline humanity. No corruption, no psychosis, no anomalies, as if he had simply accepted the transformation, as if it had waited for him, and then he vanished. No trace, no signal. For 8 standard years no one saw him, until the siege of Brakan's Maw. Imagine a battle where 12,000 Zentari warriors in layered exo-armor, equipped with graviton cannons and planetary siege mechs, surrounded a single, seemingly derelict Terran cruiser. The Dominion broadcast the operation for morale until their feed went black. The only transmission recovered later was from a repair drone, showing footage of a single figure walking through fire. His armor was unlike any known suit, black as deep space, laced with glowing red circuits pulsing like a heartbeat. In his hand, a weapon forged from unknown alloys, shaped like a lance, but resonating at 17,000 volts. He didn't run. He walked, straight into the heart of the Zentari phalanx. What followed was not war. It was eradication. The Dominion never released casualty reports, but analysts pieced together the footage. Not a single Zentari lived. From that day forward, the name Rael Vorta spread like a virus across the stars. Pirate guilds issued avoid-on-site protocols. Black site warden prisons refused contracts if his name appeared on intake logs. The Azkan. Union deployed 7 psychic interrogators just to prove he wasn't a myth. All 7 went mad, and yet Rael wasn't hunting the weak. He had a target, a goal, something deeper than vengeance. You built this war, I will end it. Who had built it? Why had Rael come back now, and what was the name he spoke? The galaxy was about to learn the answer, but by then it might already be too late. The name Rael Vorta whispered in the shadows. Of HD 189733b, the name that had caused entire fleets to freeze in fear, was not one easily forgotten. It was the name of an entity that had once been far more than a military figure. It was the name of the Azkan, a race of hyper-advanced, genetically engineered beings, masters of interdimensional warfare. They had come to the galaxy as invaders, their ships folding space itself to appear like specters on the edges of star systems. Their agenda had been clear, dominion overall, but there was something else hidden beneath the surface. A truth, buried in the deepest layers of history, one that even Rael hadn't fully understood until the moment he stood in front of the terminal. The name he had spoken was Zalora Cathar, the Azkan matriarch who had orchestrated the greatest destruction the galaxy had ever known, an extinction event that had nearly wiped out humanity. She was the architect behind the Fracture Wars, the one who had manipulated the fragile peace between the Terran states and the Zentari Dominion, knowing that the coming war would allow her to expand her empire across the stars. She had been thought dead for nearly 200 years, the victim of a mutiny led by her closest allies, or so the histories said. Rael had uncovered the truth. Zalora Cathar had survived, slipping into the depths of galactic obscurity, using her knowledge of interdimensional technology to hide her presence from all known factions. And now she was pulling the strings again. The war that had fractured humanity and the galaxy was no accident. It was her design. Rael's mission had shifted from mere vengeance to something more insidious. The war was never about territory, power, or resources. It was about wiping the slate clean, removing the vestiges of resistance, and allowing the Azkan to ascend to their rightful place as masters of the galaxy. And with each conflict, each massacre, Zalora Cathar had been pulling the strings, watching from the shadows as civilizations bled and fell. She had chosen Rael for a reason. She knew he would come, and she had waited for him to arrive, but Rael was not about to play her game. Not anymore. The cold metal of the station beneath his boots echoed through the empty halls as Rael walked, away from the terminal. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the low hum of dormant machinery and the occasional crackle of static from his helmet's comms. His mind raced, but his body remained motionless, as if he had already made peace. With the weight of his new reality, Zalora Cathar was still alive, and she had never been in control of this war. He was the one pulling the strings now. He had known the stakes since the moment he had stepped onto that dropship years ago, a boy with nothing left to lose. He had been transformed, but at the core of his being, Rael Vorta was still that same. Boy from Mars, hardened by war, forced to survive against impossible odds. The difference now was that his survival was no longer for himself. It was for humanity. It was for the galaxy. And if the Azkan were to succeed, it would mean the end of everything he had ever fought for. Rael reached the station's outer docking bay, the one place where the atmosphere still clung to the walls, a sanctuary of sorts in the middle of a forgotten world. His destination was clear. Zalora's hidden stronghold, located deep in the heart of the Xarix Rift, an area of space no human had ever returned from. The coordinates were buried in the deepest layers of Azkan archives, encrypted beyond even the most sophisticated human security systems. But Rael knew the access points. He had been taught by the best, himself. As he prepared to board his ship, the Vortex, a sleek and silent vessel outfitted with quantum warp drives and cloaking tech that could rival even the best of the Azkan, a low, haunting hum vibrated through the air. The sounds of a dying station. A warning. Rael's eyes narrowed. He wasn't alone. The station's comms buzzed to life, a voice crackling over the speakers. "Rael Vorta, we've been expecting you." His fingers clenched around the controls. As a new wave of tension gripped his chest, the voice was familiar. He had heard it once before on the battlefield, just as a ship had broken apart in front of him. The same voice that had haunted his dreams and whispered through the halls of forgotten starships. "Zalora," he muttered under his breath, the name feeling foreign and yet strangely intimate. "Don't waste your time with the human delusions. Of fate, Rael, you never understood the true nature of this war. Your kind never does." Zalora's voice echoed, not from a speaker, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere inside his mind. She was close. Rael's grip tightened. It was her. Zalora had been manipulating his every move from the moment he had joined the Revenant program. She had watched him transform, knowing that one day he would be the only one who could stop her. But Rael wasn't ready to be manipulated anymore. The weight of her words, the memories of his lost comrades, the horrors of every battlefield he had walked through, they all came crashing back in that moment. "You've underestimated me, Zalora," Rael whispered, more to himself than to her. "I'm not your pawn. I'm going to finish this, on my terms." Before she could respond, Rael activated the ship's warp drive, vanishing into the stars, leaving the crumbling station behind him. He had no time for games. The vortex sliced through the folds of space as if it were cutting through air. The course was set. The Xaric's Rift, the greatest battle of his life, awaited, and it would be a battle unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The stars outside the vortex blurred into streaks of light as it punched through the folds of hyperspace. Rael's focus was singular now. No distractions, no doubts. The coordinates to the Xaric's Rift were locked in, and the ship's quantum warp engines hummed with an eerie precision. Inside, the air was thick with tension. His neural interface buzzed as it mapped every possible outcome, every potential risk. This was no longer a simple mission. It was the final gambit in a war that had been orchestrated for centuries. The Xaric's Rift was a region of space where even the most sophisticated navigational instruments faltered. It was a place where reality itself seemed to bend, where hyperspace anomalies tore at the very fabric of the universe. Many believed it was a natural void, a dead zone, but the truth was darker. It was the Azkan's true crucible, a place where the rules of physics didn't apply, and where Zalora Kethar had hidden her greatest weapon. Rael's mind drifted back to the moment he first encountered her in the archives, when the whispers had become more than just threats, when he'd uncovered her plans. The Azkan had never been content with mere conquest. They were creators, manipulators, architects of life itself. Their ability to reshape the fabric of reality was unparalleled. And in the rift, Zalora had created a weapon that was not a ship, not a fleet, but something far more terrifying. An artificial star suspended in time and space, capable of destroying entire systems with a single thought. It was a weapon so advanced that even the Azkan had feared it. Zalora had abandoned it long ago, believing that its power was too great to wield. But Rael knew she would return. He knew she would want to use it, to reshape the galaxy in her image. She had been manipulating the war for centuries, engineering conflicts that had torn humanity apart. But this weapon, it was her ultimate move. And if Rael couldn't stop her, it would spell the end of everything. The vortex rocked slightly as it entered the outer edges of the rift, its hull creaking under the immense pressure of the space-time distortions. Outside, the stars twisted. Their light stretched and warped, creating an otherworldly landscape of rippling colors and shattered constellations. The rift itself was a strange, unnatural phenomenon, an immense nebula of dense gas and energy, swirling like a cosmic whirlpool. Rael could feel the presence of something ancient in the air, something that had existed long before even the Azkan had reached the galaxy. As he navigated deeper into the rift, the ship's warning systems flared to life. Anomalies, gravitational eddies, pockets of subspace where time was stretched or compressed. Rael's pulse quickened as the ship's autopilot engaged, keeping the vortex steady through the chaos. His eyes never left the controls, his mind fully immersed in the calculations, the algorithms. He was a machine now, not in body, but in mind. His human instincts had been enhanced by the revenant process, his every move calculated, precise, but no algorithm could prepare him for what he was about to face. Through the chaos of the rift, the vortex emerged into a dark void, a place where no stars burned and no light reached. It was here that Rael had come, the hidden stronghold of Zalora Kethar. The silence of the space was suffocating, the lack of sound disorienting, but in the distance a faint glow caught his eye. It wasn't a star, it was something far more terrifying. Rael's comms buzzed to life again. This time it was no longer the distant, manipulative voice of Zalora. Instead, it was a voice he had never heard, cold and distorted, coming from the depths of the rift itself. Rael Vorta. The words were drawn out, almost mechanical. The voice wasn't human or Azkarn. It was something else, something ancient. It echoed in the space around him, vibrating through the ship's hull. Rael's hand hovered over the weapon console, but he didn't activate the weapon systems. Not yet. He knew the threat was coming, but he also knew that this was no ordinary trap. This was something far older, something beyond Zalora's control. The Xaric's rift had been used by the Azkarn for centuries, but what if it had been changed? What if the rift was more than just a weapon depot or hiding place? What if it was alive? We have waited, the voice continued, and then it became clear. The entity wasn't speaking to him, it was speaking through him. A wave of vertigo slammed into Rael's mind, but he fought to maintain control. His vision blurred as the ship's systems flickered, as though they too were at the mercy of the rift's strange power. The Vortex. He is not your ally, Rael Vorta. You have awakened us, and now we will decide your fate. The ship lurched violently as if something had gripped it, pulling it toward the unknown. Rael's heart raced. His eyes darted around the cockpit, the hull rattling under the strain. Outside, the glow intensified, revealing the true nature of the weapon Zalora had hidden. A massive floating construct, an artificial star, suspended in the blackness, its power like nothing he had ever felt. It radiated energy so intense, it made the vortex feel fragile, like a moth in the grip of a predator's claw. But this wasn't Zalora's doing. As the ship was pulled closer, Rael saw something else in the stars, something much darker. A ship, ancient and massive, its design unrecognizable, its surface covered in symbols and writing that seemed to twist and writhe on their own. The ship was alive. It was the rift. Rael's heart pounded in his chest as realization struck him. This was no weapon of Zalora's creation. This was something older, something buried in the depths of the galaxy long before the Azkarn ever emerged. This was the true power of the rift, a living, breathing vessel of destruction, capable of reshaping reality itself. And it was waking. The time is now, Rael Vorta, the voice echoed, and for the first time Rael felt true fear. Not fear of Zalora, not fear of death, but fear of something beyond, something that no one, not even the Azkarn, had ever understood. Rael's breath caught in his throat as the massive alien vessel loomed before him. It was not like anything he had seen before. Its surface was jagged, raw, like it had been crafted from the very bones of the universe. The symbols that adorned its hull shifted in a twisted, organic rhythm, almost as if they were alive, pulsing, with an energy that reached into his mind and clawed at his thoughts. It was ancient, older than the Azkarn, older than humanity itself, and it was awakening. Rael Vorta, the voice boomed, resonating within the cockpit. It was no longer a whisper. It was a presence, a consciousness that filled every corner of the ship, reverberating through Rael's neural interface, tugging at his deepest fears and desires. You have come to awaken us. You are the key to what must come. The reckoning begins now. Rael's hands trembled at the controls, his mind racing. This was not part of the plan. Zalora's weapon had been a myth, an ancient tool of mass destruction. But this was something else entirely. The vessel before him wasn't just a weapon, it was a sentient entity, alive, aware, and powerful beyond comprehension. He had known the Azkan to manipulate the forces of the universe, but they had never encountered anything like this. "What are you?" Rael demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos that raged around him. He knew he was at the edge of the galaxy, at the brink of something far bigger than any of them had ever imagined. "We are the Echor, the first of the eternal ones. We have slumbered for eons, but now you, human, have stirred us from our rest." The voice twisted, becoming more intimate, pulling at his consciousness like a forgotten memory, unraveling his sense of self. "You are the one who will lead us to our destiny." Rael's heart hammered in his chest, the weight of the words sinking into his bones. The Echor, an ancient race, unknown to both the Azkan and humanity. Their existence was a myth, a forgotten tale of a civilization that had shaped the very fabric of space and time. But how? Why was he here? And why had it chosen him? "You're nothing more than a relic," Rael said, forcing his voice to stay, strong despite the creeping dread threatening to choke him. "A relic of a time long past. This war is ours to finish, not yours." "Ah, but you misunderstand," the Echor replied, its voice swirling around him, mixing with the distorted hum of the ship's systems. "You are but a thread in the tapestry we are weaving. Your war, your people, your universe, they are but pawns in the game we have long since set into motion." Rael's mind reeled. The implications of what the Echor was saying hit him like a freight train. This was never about Zalora Kether. The war, the destruction, had all been part of something far bigger, something that spanned eons. The Azkan were nothing more than players in a cosmic game, just as humanity had been. He had thought Zalora was the final threat, but now he understood. She was only a herald, a servant to the greater power that lay in wait. The Echor ship, the vessel of eternity, began to hum with increasing intensity. Around them, the very fabric of the rift began to warp and twist, space itself bending as the ship's power resonated through the galaxy. Rael's vision blurred, the stars around him becoming smeared ribbons of light. The rift was alive, its strange energy consuming everything in its path. He could feel the pull, the gravity of something far greater than anything he had ever experienced. In an instant, the vortex lurched violently, dragged toward the Echor vessel. It wasn't just the ship's gravity. The rift itself seemed to pull at him, twisting the laws of physics, pulling him into a singularity where time had no meaning. "You will not escape," the voice of the Echor whispered. Now more than a command, it was a statement of fact. "For your time has come, Rael Vorta. You have chosen your side." Rael slammed his hands onto the control panels, activating every countermeasure he had. The vortex bucked violently as energy surged from the rift, slamming into his ship's shields. Warning lights blared, and alarms screamed in his ears. But Rael was beyond fear now. He had no choice but to fight back. This was his final stand. The quantum warp engines sputtered as they tried to stabilize, but they were useless against the power of the Echor. The vessel's gravity wells were too strong, its energy too overwhelming. It was as if the universe itself was bending in on him. And then, just as he thought the ship would tear apart, something strange happened. A figure appeared before him, an apparition, glowing with a blinding, ethereal light. It was humanoid, in shape, but surrounded by the strange energy of the rift, its form shifting in and out of existence. "Rael Vorta," the figure spoke. Its voice was not the same as the Echo's. It was soft, almost comforting, yet laced with an undeniable urgency. "You must listen. You must understand what is coming. This is not your fight. You are caught in a battle that has already been decided." Rael's mind raced. The figure seemed familiar. Was it an illusion or something else? But as the figure reached out, a flood of memories surged through him. Visions of the past, fragments of his own life, mixed with images of long-forgotten wars, of civilizations that had risen and fallen, of battles fought across time. And then through it all a single truth emerged. The Echor had never been defeated. They had merely retreated, biding their time, and now they were returning, awakening from their slumber to reclaim the galaxy. But their return was not one of salvation. It was the end of everything. The figure's voice grew faint as the vision faded, leaving Rael alone in the cockpit. the presence of the Echor growing stronger, the vessel's grip tightening. There was no more room for doubt. The galaxy was on the brink of annihilation. Rael Vorta was no longer just a soldier. He was the last hope of the galaxy. He was humanity's final defense against the coming storm. The vortex trembled under the weight of the Echor's presence, its systems failing one by one as the ship was pulled deeper into the heart of the rift. Rael gritted his teeth, struggling against the overwhelming force that threatened to tear him apart. The once steady hum of the vortex's engines was replaced by a cacophony of alarms and shrill warnings. The ship was on the brink of collapse, its hull groaning as the energy from the Echor vessel cracked through the space-time fabric. He could feel the immense pressure building, the atmosphere growing thick with the weight of inevitability. Rael's mind raced. The visions had been clear. He had been shown the truth. The Echor were not just ancient creators, they were the architects of destruction. Their return was not a simple reclamation of power. It was an extinction event for every life form in the galaxy. They were coming to erase everything: humanity, the Azkan, and all the other species that had carved their existence into the cosmos. The war he had fought, the battles he had endured, they were meaningless in the face of this threat. But Rael was not ready to surrender. Not yet. Not when so many lives hung in the balance. The apparition, the figure from the rift, had told him he was caught in a battle that had already been decided. But Rael refused to accept that. The galaxy might be at the mercy of the Echor, but he was not. He wasn't just a soldier. He was the culmination of the revenant process, the last remnant of humanity's greatest warriors. He had the power to change the course of this war, and he would use it. Rael's eyes darted to the weapons control panel, his fingers dancing. Over the console, he could feel the ship's systems beginning to give way. The rift was alive, its energy seeping through every corner of the vortex. But Rael had one last weapon, one that could either destroy everything or offer a final chance at salvation. It was a desperate move, one he had prepared for only in the direst of circumstances. He had set the vortex's core to overload. "I'm not giving up," Rael muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His hand hovered over the trigger. The core was unstable, dangerously close to collapse. But if he could use its detonation to channel an energy burst at the right moment, it could breach the Echor vessel's defenses. It was a suicide mission, but it was also his only chance. As his finger pressed down on the activation button, the ship shuddered violently. The energy from the rift intensified, and the Echor vessel responded in kind. The massive, living ship began to pulse, its symbols twisting faster, its gravity wells deepening. Rael's vision blurred again as the rift's energy tore into him, dragging him toward the center of the storm. He had no idea what was happening to his ship or to himself, but he knew one thing. This was the end, or it would be. Suddenly, everything stopped. The vortex froze mid-motion, suspended in the black void of the rift. For a fleeting moment, it was as if the universe itself had held its breath. Then, in an instant, the ship was thrust forward, faster than Rael's senses could comprehend. Before him, the Echor vessel loomed, its immense living surface pulsing with a power so immense it felt like 1,000 suns were about to explode, in unison. But Rael wasn't focused on the vessel itself. His gaze was fixed on the heart of the rift, the place where the Echor's power had originated, the epicenter of their domination. This was it, the final moment. Rael's hand shot forward, his fingers pressing the launch sequence for the core's overload. The vortex screamed as the power surged through its systems, the quantum destabilizer activating with an ear-splitting roar. A wave of energy, pure and undiluted, shot forward, directly toward the Echor vessel. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, and then everything erupted in blinding light. The explosion was beyond anything Rael had ever witnessed. The vortex shuddered and groaned as the energy wave collided with the Echor vessel. The very fabric of space around them twisted violently, and Rael felt his body being torn apart by the shockwave. The ship's hull cracked, and the cockpit glass shattered as the forces of the explosion engulfed him. But Rael wasn't dead. Not yet. His vision swam. But through the chaos he saw it. The Echor vessel was disintegrating, its massive form unraveling like a cosmic thread being pulled apart by a higher power. The energy that had once sustained it was now feeding into the rift, a violent cascade of destruction that surged outward like a tidal wave. The rift itself, once a prison for the Echor, began to collapse in on itself. Rael struggled to maintain control as the vortex was buffeted by the blast, the ship careening toward the event horizon of the collapsing rift. The heat inside the cockpit became unbearable, and the systems flickered, shutting down one by one. But Rael held on. He had to. He was humanity's last chance. "Not yet," Rael growled, his voice hoarse. He gritted his teeth, fighting the overwhelming pain as he forced the vortex's final engines to engage, using the last of the power reserves to push the ship toward safety. The warp engines flared to life, just as the rift around them began to collapse. In the distance, the stars began to reappear, slowly, tentatively, as if the galaxy itself had just taken its first breath after a long, suffocating silence. The vortex shot free from the collapsing rift, its engines barely functioning. As it careened back into normal space, Rael's hands shook as he gripped the controls, his vision fading. But the stars were there. The galaxy was still there. The Echor had been defeated, the weapon had been destroyed, and with it, the threat that had loomed over the galaxy for millennia had been erased. Rael collapsed back into his seat, breathing heavily. His body was battered, broken, but his heart still beat. Humanity still had a future, and he was its protector.